We could go another 2-3 weeks and just wipe everybody out. I'd rather not do that. Very easy to do. They're ready to do it. They want to do it. They want to do it. But if we can get something down in writing which will accomplish the same thing without killing everybody, I'd like to do that. Most of my people, I think, would like to do that. Some people wouldn't, but most of them would. But we had to take a detour as far as wishes for, and I'm very proud of that detour.
President Trump leaving the door open for more military action in Iran, moments after telling reporters a deal could happen as soon as this weekend. The question is the president once again overselling the likelihood of an agreement? It comes as there was a rare rebuke of President Trump's power in the House yesterday, with lawmakers passing a bipartisan measure directing the president to withdraw forces from Iran or seek congressional approval to extend the war. The question is, can they actually rein in his war powers, or was this a mostly symbolic move? Plus, the president doesn't appear to be ready to give up on the so-called anti-weaponization fund, despite his administration saying it's not moving forward, at least for now. The question is, will this just be another headache for Congress to deal with down the road? It's way too early for this. Good morning and welcome to Way Too Early, the show that can hear New York Knicks fans cheering from all the way here in Washington. I'm sure they're in the control from all the way here in Washington. I'm sure they're in the control room too. We got them everywhere. We will have our highlights from Game 1 of the finals straight ahead. I'm Ali Vitale on this Thursday, June 4th. We're going to get right to it with the news. The United States and Iran continue to give mixed messages on where the war stands, now in its fourth month. President Trump claimed yesterday negotiations have gone very well, but Iran said there has not been significant progress, as the country's foreign minister vowed, quote, any hostile act will be met with an immediate, decisive response. Video from the Iranian drone attack yesterday on Kuwait's main airport shows extensive damage, debris, smoke, and flames throughout a cessation of Hezbollah fire and removal of all Hezbollah operatives from southern Lebanon. That's according to a joint statement from the two nations, along with the U.S. The agreement depends on the cooperation of Hezbollah, which is not controlled by the Lebanese government and is aligned with Iran. But it could remove a major obstacle to peace talks, as Tehran has insisted Lebanon be part of any deal with the U.S. Israel, meanwhile, has continued its attacks in southern Lebanon today, where it maintains a large military presence on the ground. Meanwhile, back here at home, in a striking rebuke to President Trump, the House yesterday passed a Democratic-led measure to limit his war powers in Iran. Party lines joining with all Democrats in voting yes. The legislation requires the president to withdraw U.S. forces from hostilities with Iran or come back and get approval from Congress to continue the war. That resolution now heads to the Senate, but even if it were to get approval from Congress to continue the war. That resolution now heads to the Senate, but even if it were to pass both chambers, and it's a big if, it faces headwinds and legal questions, standing for now as a symbolic blow to President Mr. President. And legal questions, standing for now as a symbolic blow to President. Yesterday you signed, Mr. President. Blow to President. Yesterday you signed, Mr. President.
That's true. I mean, a ceasefire there is much different than a ceasefire in other parts of the world.
Let's get into it with former spokesperson for the U.S. mission to the United Nations, Hagar Shamali. She also worked at the NSC and the Treasury Department. You're a Lebanon expert, so the perfect person to help us sort of dissect what's happening here, because it sounds like there is some bill was imminent and then he didn't sign off on it. So what's your actual reading of the tea leaves here between all of these various parts of the conflict that we're following?
Yes, a lot of moving parts. Yeah. So on Iran, what I'm hearing is that the two sides are very far apart still. And this is a deal that's really only focused still on the Strait of Hormuz, because Trump is facing a lot of pressure, given rising gas prices in the pending midterm elections. What happened earlier this week, you have two things that really kind of blew things up for us. No pun intended. Yeah. You had Prime Minister Netanyahu on Sunday threatened to strike Beirut. Yep. The Iranian regime on Monday said talks are off unless there's a ceasefire in Lebanon. And because Trump wants this deal, and he's showing his cards that he very much wants a deal.
While also saying, I don't care.
Right, yeah. Saying he's bored with it. Frankly, I'm getting bored with it too. It's been 60 days with this ceasefire. And so he, because of that though, because he does want a deal, he said, okay, fine, I'm going to make that happen. And then puts out a tweet saying that Israel and Hezbollah are going to stop shooting each other and that he has spoken to a highly placed representative of Hezbollah, which upended a few things for those of us working on peace efforts, because it was selling Lebanon to Iran, and it now established that suddenly we talk to Hezbollah, a terrorist organization that has so much American blood on its hands. But then when you had the peace talks take place this week, just between Israel and Lebanon, though we have some glimmers of hope there. On Iran, I don't see much movement. I will tell you, though, that we have been now in the ceasefire situation longer than we've been in the war part of the ceasefire. Mm-hmm. And those high gas prices are not going anywhere unless Trump makes a decisive move of some kind.
And then when you take in totality that landscape paired with now this new rebuke on Capitol Hill, which frankly had been brewing for the last 2 weeks, it feels to me like it's the earliest indicator of Republican angst around this conflict for the economic and political reasons that you point out. And yet, when you apply what happened in Congress to diplomatic efforts, does it make any motions? Does it have any ripple effects?
Well, this move related to the War Powers Act won't.
Yeah.
It's symbolic, if anything. It's not going to pass the Senate, number one. And number two, even if it were to pass the Senate, you have some real constitutional issues there. I mean, there are absolutely lawyers that would go get it stuck in some kind of litigation or appeals to the Supreme Court at least. And they would be fair in requesting that, by the way, because the Constitution is quite clear in the type of war authorities it gives to the commander-in-chief. And so I don't see I don't see anybody in Washington also taken by the vote. In my view, I saw the vote. What fascinated me were the numbers related to that vote. It had a lot of people, and it is really reflecting this pressure that Republicans are feeling.
Whereas when you talk about the politics of this foreign policy moment, I had Democrats immediately text me after that vote and say, wow, there was a lot of Republicans that voted for Trump's war in Iran, effectively saying that if they're not voting to hem him in, they're going to try to tag them with being supporters of a conflict that is spiking American gas prices and having ripple effects throughout other sectors of the U.S. economy. That's where the politics has always been intertwined with this, and certainly that's the space between where you and I live. But then, of course, there was Secretary of State Marco Rubio this week, who was really the chief messenger around and on behalf of the war efforts on the Hill this week. He spent nearly 4 hours before the House Foreign Affairs Committee yesterday, facing sharp questions about the consequences of the Iran war and whether the administration fully weighed the risks. Rubio was also put on the defensive after Democrats challenged him over videos they say show President Trump sleeping during cabinet meetings. Watch that.
Did you warn President Trump before the Iran war began that this conflict would drive up cost on gas, food, travel, and shit?
The president,
yes or no?
The president and the full administration was aware that there would be consequences to action, but the consequences of Iran having a nuclear weapon were worse.
Did you warn him? Did you warn him that launching a war in Iran could result in the regime placing a chokehold on the Strait of Hormuz?
All the risk factors were understood, but the most important risk factor was Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon.
Did you warn him? If you didn't warn him, say yes.
If the war is over, I have a simple question. Who won?
First of all, Epic Fury is over, which is what you would consider the war. That operation is
So you agree it's a war, then?
No, those are hostilities. They called it a war.
Okay.
I'm just responding to the Senator
Mr. Secretary, you can change the name of the operation. It doesn't change the fact that the strait is still closed and my service members and all of our service members are still in harm's way. The war is not over.
You've been at more than one meeting where President Trump has fallen asleep.
That's false. That's false. I've never seen him fall asleep. On the contrary, the guy doesn't sleep, which is a big problem because he calls me at 2 in the morning. He calls me at 5 in the morning. And, you know, I like to sleep a little bit, maybe not 12 hours, but at least 6. So he works. The other day he was at the Oval Office.
Than one meeting where President Trump has fallen asleep.
That's false. That's false. I've never seen him fall asleep. On the contrary, the guy doesn't sleep, which is a big problem because he calls me at 2 in the morning. He calls me at 5 in the morning. And, you know, I like to sleep a little bit, maybe not 12 hours, but at least 6. So he works. The other day he was at the Oval Office. And, you know, I like to sleep a little bit, maybe not 12 hours, but at least 6. So he works. The other day he was at the Oval Office until 12:30 p.m. 12:30 a.m. I don't know what you're talking about.
Secretary Rubio, I'm going to show you in a moment a video that shows you just lied to Congress.
Oh, okay.
So this is a video of a cabinet meeting literally from last month where Donald Trump
is trying to end it.
You were literally talking about issues of war and peace, and Donald Trump is sleeping right next to you.
I watched and listened to most of the 4 hours of this from outside of the room yesterday in the hall, and I think it was a lot of fiery moments from Democrats, Republicans really continuing to show that they want to give this administration leeway to deal with Iran. But what jumped out to you? I mean, to me, the fact that Rubio came out and said the day before, the war is over, to Senator Booker, that felt to me like something the administration needs to say if they want to continue making the war powers argument that they've been making. But I wonder what stood out to you.
Well, it's the part that's difficult. First of all, it was quite painful. And by the way, I have worked in Washington for a long time, and I have seen leaders fall asleep at the table of all parties. It happens. It doesn't discriminate against party. So Representative Lieu, I'm sure he's fallen asleep in his own meetings. But I will say that, again, we have been, there was a ceasefire brokered on April 8th. And so we've now been in that time period for longer than we were in epic fury, I guess, in the operations. It's still, whether we get into the semantics of war or not war, it doesn't matter. The problem is we're facing this instability in the region. They're still striking partners in the Gulf, the Iranian regime. And on our end, I don't believe President Trump has enough leeway to finish the job. And I personally believe he has to finish the job. Vice President Vance said this at the very beginning, he wasn't in favor of the war, but he said, if you're going to go in, you have to finish the job. And the reason is because you're not negotiating with the government. You're negotiating with a terrorist organization. And the longer this weird middle ground stays, the more things are going to be unstable, the more that has an impact in the Gulf as well in particular, and on our gas prices.
I think the bigger question is, what does it look like to finish the job? And what does that require on the part of U.S. troops and the president?
Yeah, it requires a bigger investment, unfortunately. Both kinetic action in Iran of whatever targets might be remaining, but it takes greater military presence in the Strait of Hormuz to really push the Iranians back, to make sure it remains open, and probably, by the way, more partnerships with our allies.
And that is also why I think there is being made a distinction on the semantics of, are we in an active war? Is it over? Is it not? Because many in Congress feel, and this is on both sides, that if it does require more investment and more American treasure, they would like to have a say in doing that push, that next move. Former spokesperson for the U.S. mission to the United Nations, Hagar Shamali, thank you. You might be getting bored with this conflict, but you never make it boring. Thank you. Still ahead for us, what we're learning this morning about President Trump's plan to nominate Todd Blanche for Attorney General on a permanent basis. Plus, the president's still in favor of a so-called anti-weaponization fund that had reportedly been abandoned. We're going to show you his new comments on that. Get you those stories and more when we come right back. In the coming days, President Trump is expected to nominate acting Attorney General Todd Blanche to serve in that role permanently. That's according to a senior administration official speaking to MS Now. Back in April, Trump appointed Blanche to lead the DOJ in an acting capacity after firing then AG Pam Bondi. Blanche previously served as President Trump's personal attorney. I want you to listen to what Trump said yesterday during an interview with the New York Post.
Will he be Attorney General, or have you decided?
I think he will, yeah.
You haven't got someone else in mind?
No.
Not Ron DeSantis?
I wanted to see how he's received. You know, we put him as acting, and he's done a very good job.
The DeSantis rumor had been out there. Nice to see it knocked down. But two administration officials told MS Now Blanche has developed good relationships with Republican lawmakers on Capitol Hill that might help allay some confirmation issues he will inevitably face. But ultimately, they said, his confirmation may hinge on whether or not the so-called anti-weaponization fund is actually dropped. It's a huge question on the Hill. That fund was expected to compensate people who claim they were victims of unfair prosecution by the government, including January 6th insurrectionists. Complicating things even further, it's President Trump now refusing to confirm that the $1.776 billion so-called anti-weaponization fund has really been scrapped. Here's some of what he told reporters yesterday in the Oval Office about it.
Is the $1.8 billion DOJ fund dead, or is it on hold?
It's, I'd have to ask the lawyers, I don't know. I know one thing, the weaponization, are you talking about the weaponization fund?
Yeah, what's your
The weaponization fund, as far as I'm concerned, was a beautiful thing. It was something I didn't make it, but I heard that. I thought that was the greatest thing because people like you have abused our people so badly.
I cannot stress how much those comments are going to complicate efforts on the Hill to confirm someone like Todd Blanche. His confirmation hearing is effectively just going to be about this now, because those comments from the president come just days after a White House source told MS Now the president planned to abandon the fund amid escalating bipartisan backlash. And I have to tell you, I've spoken to Republican senators who say they've had assurances from the White House that this is going to be dropped. They won't say who gave those assurances, but they seem like they really want to be sure that this is going away. And the president is very much keeping it alive now. We're going to see what happens for Todd Blanche when those confirmation hearings hit. Still ahead for us, though, we're going to turn to sports with highlights from the New York Knicks' big win on the road in Game 1 of the NBA Finals. Plus, President Trump has suggested he might attend Game 3 when the series comes to Madison Square Garden. We're going to have new reporting on that. But first, we also want to know, why are you awake? Email your reasons to waytooearly@ms.now. You can also tell me on social media. I'm at Ali Vitale. Use the hashtag #waytooearly. We're going to read our favorite answers a bit later. Moses Small has that for us. Moses, good morning.
Ali, good morning. We're going to watch the heat continue to build over the next couple days, but we're lucky that this is the good type of heat. And what I mean by that is that for New York and for D.C., we're still going to reach into the 80s. There is even a chance that the D.C. area could get closer to the 90s, but it's not going to be that humid. That means an 85 is actually going to feel like an 85. It just stops it from being really, really oppressive. Reason being, we have a big area of high pressure over the eastern part of the country. Imagine a big bubble or a dome of warm air that holds the heat in on the one hand, but also prevents rain on the other hand. So when I bring up the futurecast, notice it's all avoiding this part of the country. The only place where I'm really going to be watching out for severe weather is going to be in the northern plains. Once again, not a huge risk profile here, but just like yesterday, a chance you could see some hail, potentially even golf ball size hail once things get going. And I would look at the 6 to 8 p.m. time frame for when that could start. And then, as I mentioned, the heat is just building. So tomorrow, our highs are going to be closer to 90. I'm looking at 93 tomorrow for D.C. So we knew this was going to happen, but we're finally getting a little bit more of that summery weather. I'm making the most of it, but my cats are going to be sitting in the AC for a few more days now.
Gotta always keep the cats in the AC. You did warn us. MS Now weather reporter Moses Small. Thank you, as always. And still ahead for us this morning, we'll get the latest from Capitol Hill after the Senate advanced a budget reconciliation bill yesterday that did not include the $1 billion President Trump wanted for his White House ballroom project. We're going to talk about that move by Republicans coming up next on Way Too Early. Welcome back to Way Too Early, 5:30 on the dot here on the East Coast, 2:30 out west. I'm Ali Vitale. The Senate has finally advanced an immigration spending bill after Republicans removed language that provided up to $1 billion for security upgrades to President Trump's White House ballroom project. Lawmakers voted along party lines yesterday to begin consideration of that bill, setting up a series of unlimited back-to-back amendment votes before final passage. We like to call that vote-a-rama. The revised package contains roughly $70 billion to fund ICE and Border Patrol through 2029. The move to drop the ballroom funding, though, is a major setback for Trump, who has pressed Republican senators for weeks about the need for Congress to authorize that project. I want to bring in my colleague, MS Now congressional reporter Michael Schnell. So first, talk a little bit about the timing that we expect on this front, because vote-a-ramas usually happen overnight, but this one might happen in broad daylight.
Yeah, I can tell you the start time. It's going to be around 10 a.m. this morning. That's when Democratic senators are tracking it. Can't tell you an end time because, as we both know, the whole part and thing about vote-a-rama is that it could go as long as possible. Yep. Senators can introduce as many amendments as they want, force as many votes as they want on that. So this could be an entire day affair. This is the thing that, as you mentioned, we usually see go overnight, and usually senators get a little tired of it once the sun starts to come up and they call it quits. Could go a little longer considering we are in the broad daylight. They had a full night of sleep. So we're going to have to see how long it goes, but certainly we're in for a long day.
But there's also going to be some interesting amendments, and largely these are pieces of messaging, but there are some that might actually be important to this process. Some could be focused on curtailing or blocking off the anti-weaponization fund that the White House is still, rather, the president is still keeping alive, even as the attorney general or acting attorney general and other senators keep trying to say, no, the door is closed. So what are some of the amendments that you're looking out for?
Yeah, well, the first one that we're going to see, we heard from Schumer World overnight, is that Chuck Schumer is going to introduce an amendment called essentially a motion to recommit. What it would do is, if successful, it just needs 51 votes for success. It would go back to committee, so it would essentially go backwards, and then it would have instructions to add language to block the anti-weaponization fund. Now, Again, that only needs 51 votes, which means theoretically, if just 4 Republicans come on board, it could see success. But I wouldn't hold your breath on that because this would be putting reconciliation backwards. It would be moving a few steps back, sending it back.
Reverse.
Right, exactly, making a reverse, sending it back to committee. So even though there are plenty of Republicans who want to get on board with blocking the fund, I wouldn't hold your breath on them supporting that. But certainly other amendments, right? We've heard from Democrats for days that they are going to go over and over and over again, introducing language to try and curtail that weaponization fund. In fact, there are some Republicans, Tom Tillis, for example, who's going to have their own amendments to try to curtail this. Yes, Todd Blanche has said that it is dead. He said that very clearly during that hearing. However, when you have the president in the Oval Office talking to reporters, not clear if it's paused or done, and also talking about why he feels it's important, that's why Republicans and Democrats want to get this in right.
Yeah, and it's also another example of the president complicating his own efforts. He's done that certainly on this reconciliation bill, which you've heard me say this in meetings here. It should have been so simple for Republicans to just put forward an immigration funding bill. This is a priority for them. It works for their base in a midterm election year. It's exactly the kind of thing that they should want to tout. And then Trump comes in and complicates it by saying, you've also got to throw in $1 billion for the ballroom. And senators are like, wait, what? That has nothing to do with what's happening here. Then you add on top of it this idea of a $1.776 billion fund that insurrectionists who attacked the Capitol that these very senators were in could be accessing. And then another example of it on a different piece of legislation is the ways that his appointment of Bill Pulte to be the director of national intelligence in an acting capacity could complicate this FISA effort that you've been following. You're writing about this for MS.now. So talk a little bit about the contours of that debate and the ways that it's another example of what we're talking about here.
Theoretically speaking, right, Senate Republicans could have had an easy breezy past few weeks. Yes. I mean, they were a few days away from approving this reconciliation bill. In fact, I got to hand it to them. With reconciliation, you can get a lot done because it's just on party lines. Mm-hmm. Republicans backed away from putting more of their priorities in this piece of legislation. They wanted it to be clean, skinny. They wanted it to just be ICE and Border Patrol funding, get in and get out quickly. And then President Trump essentially cut their legs out from under, introducing this anti-weaponization fund just days before they were set to approve it, which is what has stalled this. It's what stalled and prompted John Thune to send lawmakers on recess early. You mentioned the ballroom funding. That also curtailed things. Now we're seeing Bill Pulte with FISA. And by the way, President Trump overnight saying that he's going to officially nominate Todd Blanche to be Attorney General, where that's going to require votes from the Senate. And mind you, we're just 2 weeks out from that very testy meeting. Testy, fiery, by the way, in the words of Ted Cruz, that Todd Blanche had with Senate Republicans. So certainly President Trump is not building up any good graces with Senate Republicans, and a lot of them feel that he has been making their job much more difficult. Own goal is a phrase we've been hearing a lot in the Capitol.
A lot, especially when you consider that meeting that Republican senators had behind closed doors with Blanche. Some of them are talking to people saying they've never seen anything like it in all their years in the Capitol. Yeah. And in large part, that's because you don't typically have to take cabinet members to task in a private lunch over whatever it is that they're trying to do within their agency. And yet that's very much where we are, where Republicans can't really vent publicly, so they're doing it privately, and it really lends to some drama.
It doesn't even leak also. Ted Cruz just talks about it on his podcast.
Yeah, I was going to say, just tweeted it out in effect. MS Now congressional reporter Michael Schnell, grab your caffeine. It's going to be a long day.
Always.
Thank you. Still ahead for us this morning, we're going to go live to CNBC for an early look at how investors are reacting to the latest developments in the Middle East. Plus, Elon Musk's SpaceX is eyeing a blockbuster. Time now for business. For that, let's bring in CNBC's Charlotte Reed, live from London. Charlotte, good to see you. We started the show talking about how Lebanon and Israel agreed yesterday to a ceasefire, raised some hope for progress in the Middle East. But how are markets reacting now to that news?
Well, the U.S. futures are mixed this morning after stocks pulled back from record highs on Wednesday. Now, Nasdaq futures are lower as Broadcom and CrowdStrike plunged after hours following earnings. But certainly the geopolitical tensions is still unnerving investors. A pickup in U.S.-Iran tensions, even as a ceasefire was agreed between Israel and Lebanon late on Wednesday. In an exclusive interview with CNBC yesterday, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said Israel and the U.S. were ready to return to military action against Iran if needed. And now we see, of course, oil prices higher off the back of some of these comments and Treasury yields higher as well. Today, traders will watch out for the first quarter's unit labor labor costs and productivity final readings, as well as initial jobless claims for the week ending May 30th.
So we'll try to keep track of all of that. Meanwhile, real estate firm Redfin found that nearly 6% of all home listings were pulled off the market in April. It's the highest rate since the pandemic in 2020. What's the reason for the trend?
Indeed, nationwide, 5.8% of all home listings being pulled off the market in April. That's according to real estate brokerage Redfin. Now, that ties with December for the highest share of homes delisted since March 2020, when the pandemic hit and the housing market froze. Now, this time, it's right in the midst of the all-important spring market. Now, Atlanta saw the highest share of homes coming off the market in April, with 1 in 10 delisted. San Jose in California followed, then Los Angeles, Dallas, and Seattle. Now, the increase comes as higher mortgage rates, elevated gas prices, and weaker consumer confidence are all taking their toll on housing demand.
And finally, after a lot of anticipation, Elon Musk's SpaceX is getting ready to hit the market. What's the company seeking for its IPO? These have been some eye-popping numbers.
We've had some of these numbers in the Securities and Exchange Commission filing yesterday. So they plan to market the IPO at a fixed price of $135 per share, seeking to raise as much as $86 billion. So that would give SpaceX a valuation of $1.77 trillion. That would make SpaceX the 7th biggest company in the U.S., above Musk's other company, Tesla, which has a market cap of about $1.6 trillion. Now, SpaceX is planning to debut on the Nasdaq on June 12th in what's set to be the biggest IPO ever. Now, SpaceX listing come as we see other big tech companies try to raise more money in their AI race. A couple of days ago, Anthropic confidentially filed for its listing, and OpenAI is also expected to unveil its IPO plans very soon.
CNBC's Charlotte Reed, live from London. Thank you. Still ahead for us this morning, Homeland Security Secretary Markwayne Mullin was also on the Hill yesterday, facing questions from lawmakers about ICE and immigration tactics. One of them, Democratic Homeland Security Secretary Markwayne Mullin testified before the House Homeland Security Committee for more than 3 hours yesterday. He faced pointed questions from Democrats on ICE training and tactics, the ongoing protests outside an immigration detention center in New Jersey, and more.
Am I going to have to tell my children at home to carry an American passport with them when they're out in the street?
Congressman, I'm from Indian country. I'm from Indian country, and we got a lot of brown people around there, too. I'm Cherokee.
No, I'm not talking about...
We're not doing that. No, but
look,
it is. It's the same thing that you're saying.
Renee Good and Alex Pretty, we're not brown. Oh, my God. Okay?
But why
we have American citizens arrested right now by ICE, American citizens that are actually being deported, American citizens getting roughed up. I see this every day, sir. Look,
so is my
your
ICE
officers
agents.
have a badge, they have a gun, and they have federal power, sir.
Yeah.
They have to respect Americans. Forget about undocumented. Let's talk American citizens.
Let's talk about that.
What can we do to protect the rights of American citizens?
Well, how can we protect? We can protect the rights of American citizens all day long. They don't have the right to assault my officers. They're
not. If you're driving by taking pictures of a situation, that's their First Amendment right.
Detainees complain of healthcare treatment taking up to a week or more. Do you audit or track how long it takes between complaining about a health condition and the time it takes to receive care? Yes or no?
In a state penitentiary, a 48-hour...
We're not talking about state penitentiaries, sir. You do not oversee... I'm not speaking of state penitentiaries. I'm speaking of Delaney Hall
our standards pass and succeed your own state penitentiary.
Okay, so as I understand it, yet again, the answer is I don't know.
Yesterday, the thing that concerned me is that you would not certify to Senator Murphy that you will follow the court orders.
What I said is
even
the exact
if
same
you
answer I gave you right now.
Sorry?
I gave him the exact same answer I gave you. We will enforce the nation's laws. That we don't pick and choose which law we enforce the nation's laws. But it is...
So then why is it relevant whether it's political or not?
Because we see lower benches and even upper benches that make decisions based on political reasons, not just...
So who makes that decision? You say we see it. Who decides that it's
all the time? Tell me it hasn't happened.
Joining us now, one of the lawmakers. We heard there questioning Secretary Mullen, Democratic Congresswoman Ana Lilia Mejia of New Jersey. So we just saw some of your questions there to him. What did you make of the answers that you got to your questions and that your colleagues got there and over the course of the 3 hours that he was in front of you?
I mean, it was clear that he didn't want to actually answer questions or be held accountable. I had expressed in that moment that I had actually seen firsthand the conditions at both Delaney Hall and at the Elizabeth Detention Center. And what I saw was shocking. I met pregnant women who weren't getting prenatal care. I met teenagers who were desperate to finish their high school education. I met people with chronic diseases that is super clear that the administration, that these facilities are not able to ensure their well-being. People with diabetes whose medication was being denied or skipped or changed. People with heart conditions. I met an individual who didn't have teeth and wasn't provided any dental care and had been drinking Ensure as his meals for the months that he has been detained. This is inhumane. This is unjust. And I will remind people, as I tried to remind the secretary, that the people in Delaney Hall are categorized as low risk. That means that they don't have criminal records. That means that some of them had protective status or legal status until a few months ago. And then they were ripped and stolen from our streets. And some of them violently so. And then they are becoming ill in our detention facilities. This is unconscionable, and we should not continue to fund it.
And yet I did think it was striking that the secretary's reaction and answer to your question was to say, well, we're doing what state penitentiaries do. I mean, the fact that that is the comparison point that they're using, I think really says something.
Yes, absolutely. What it says is that they are ignoring due process. What it says is that they don't care that these individuals haven't actually been convicted of some crime that is punishable, not only with incarceration, but by death. Again, by subjecting people who have chronic health conditions to the denial of their medication, to the lack of medication, to inedible food, to these conditions that put their health at risk, can be a death sentence.
And what do you make then of the fact that we've focused a lot on Delaney Hall over the course of the last few weeks? What is the situation there? And in the aftermath of you and other members of Congress going and actually being able to survey and talk to people inside, has that changed anything for the better?
Look, what I know is that in order for us to have a government that is actually accountable to the American people, we need oversight and we need transparency. And members of Congress have the duty, the obligation, and the privilege to go into these federal facilities and be the eyes and ears for the American people. That is exactly what my colleagues in New Jersey and I have decided to do. Congresswoman Nellie Poe, Bonnie Watson-Coleman, LaMonica McIver, Frank Pallone, Menendez and I have made a commitment. We're going to go into Delaney Hall, to the Elizabeth Detention Center every week as long as these conditions warrant, because we know that the American people do not want to fund chaos. We do not want to fund injustice. We do not want to kill our friends and neighbors. We do need to have the kind of immigration system that allows people to go through the process in an efficient, effective way without denying people due process and equal protection. We can do both.
We heard Congressman Correa there talking about the incidents in January when 2 American citizens were shot and killed by immigration enforcement officials on the ground in Minneapolis. That, of course, spurred Democrats to say we are not putting another cent of our approved funding into these institutions. And yet Senate Republicans are about to embark on a reconciliation process that we were just talking about that would see millions of dollars flow to ICE and Border Protection. I know Democrats are not likely to provide votes on that, but what should Americans know about that funding and the fact that it's going out the door anyway?
I mean, the bottom line that every American needs to be aware of is that we cannot continue to fund a despotic agency that is more beholden to one individual, a president, and an ideology than the Constitution. This isn't about just the denial of due process and equal protection and breaking our Constitution in regards to immigrants. When we lose the coverage of the integrity of our Constitution, when we deny due process to those who are eligible, which is everyone on U.S. soil. We are denying it to every American citizen. So you should be concerned. You should be against giving billions of dollars to a despotic agency that will turn its guns on the American people and then incarcerate you and treat you with inhumanity.
And I think that was one of the things that there was a hope on Capitol Hill, at least for a few weeks, that guardrails would be put in place, because it seemed like there should have been widespread agreement that something needed to change so that American citizens weren't out exercising their right to protest and being shot by immigration officials. Ultimately, those guardrails didn't manifest, and this is where we are. But I think it's important for us to remember sort of the process that got us here. There's so much more for us to talk about. We have to leave it there. Democratic Congresswoman Ana Lilia Mejia of New Jersey, thank you for coming on with us.
Thank you.
And earlier in the show, we also...
अंधेरी दीवारों में खुद को ढूंढता हूँ गए जो दिन सहाने थे उन्हीं को सोचता हूँ मैं तुम्हारे बिन ये मौसम भी बड़ा बेसर्द लगता है दिल का हर एक कोना अब बहुत ही दूर भरता है अंधेरी दीवारों में खुद को ढूंढता हूँ मैं ये जो दिन सुहाने थे उन्हीं को सोचता हूँ मैं तुम्हारे बिन ये मौसम भी बड़ा सर्द लगता है दिल का हर एक कोना बहुत ही दर्द भरता है मेरे साए भी मुझसे अब जुदा होने को कहते हैं तुझे खोने की राहों में ये आंसू बहने लगते हैं कहाँ जाऊं कहाँ ढूंढूं मेरा वो साजो सामा तो मेरी हर एक तमन्ना तू मेरी रूह का मका तू लकीरों में नहीं लिखा जो तुमने ख्वाब देखा था वफा की इस कहानी में फकत एक गम ही लिखा था सितारों से भी पूछता है पता तेरा कहाँ होगा मगर खामोश है दुनिया कहाँ मेरा जहाँ होगा बस एक बार मुड़ के देख ले मेरी बेबसी की सूरत मुझे है आज भी तेरी वफा की सख्त जरूरत साए मेरे तन्हा सफर बस रह गया दर्द का असर साए मेरे तन्हा सफर बस रह गया दर्द का असर